The end of March here in Zone 5, Wisconsin is the perfect time to be thinking about avoiding analysis paralysis in the garden. Guten gardening, everybody! You ever find yourself spending hours of time researching different vegetable varieties, analyzing soil types, calculating planting schedules, only to find yourself completely overwhelmed and at a standstill, not doing anything in preparation for your upcoming garden? Well, that's what's known as analysis paralysis. And I would say that this is a pretty common problem when it comes to gardening. And while it's important to understand the bigger picture and to focus in on each of these details, getting bogged down creates a much bigger problem. So today we're going to talk to you about some tips to avoid analysis paralysis in the garden. Now, we've hinted at or addressed analysis paralysis a little bit in some of our previous videos, but then we did a poll where we asked our community basically that same question I started this video with, which is, have you ever experienced the telltale signs of analysis paralysis? And 75% of you said they had. And so clearly, that's a potential problem for many of us that's going to really put us behind. So let's get right into some of the tips that are going to help us avoid going down that path. And the first one is to define your goals. And I think this is really important to think about, because the goals that I have for my family are likely going to be different than the goals that you have. And so understanding ahead of time where you want to end up is really important. So when I talk about goals, I mean, what do you want to grow and why? Because for some of you, that what do you want to grow is focused on vegetables and fruits. For some of you, it could be a flower garden. It really depends. For us, our goal is to produce as much food as we can so that we don't have to purchase or rely on the store for our fresh produce. But whatever that end product that you want is, if you understand that goal, then that will help you to narrow down your options and make better decisions in your garden planning. An example of what you can do here, if you're trying to grow vegetables and that's your primary goal, then spending time researching which vegetables grow best in your area can help you narrow down and focus in on that goal. Now, second, our advice would be to break down your bigger tasks into smaller ones so one singular task doesn't feel overwhelming or doesn't take up all of your time. A good example of this would be if you're trying to start a vegetable garden. If you just think about that as what the end product is versus breaking it down into smaller steps to get there, it might seem a little bit overwhelming. But if instead we think about this as picking the location, determining the soil that we need in there, picking the different vegetables we want to grow, and then planting the seeds, we've divided that much bigger task into smaller tasks that we can then take on and accomplish one at a time, rather than, again, feeling overwhelmed by what it takes in its entirety to create a vegetable garden. Next up, you want to make sure you're setting deadlines for yourself. I don't know about you, but whenever I work with a deadline, if I know that end date, I can actually work backwards to make sure I'm achieving whatever goals I have or finishing whatever products I have by that deadline. You know, one of the things we've been doing is showing you which seeds we're starting in which month. And we have to do that because we have specific deadlines for different vegetables if we want to get them out in time. So if I know that I want to plant a vegetable garden, what I want to do is to pick a deadline for when I want to have that garden planted and then work backwards to determine when I need to have my seeds picked, when I need to make sure my soil's ready, and so forth. Now, the next one is a doozy. You've got to prioritize your tasks. And if I'm being perfectly transparent, this is one that I've struggled with quite a bit because there are often tasks that are ones that we would prefer to do. But if we're not prioritizing, what can happen is, let's say that I really want to grow a vegetable garden, but I also want to have some ornamental flowers as well. Which of those is more important to my end goal? For me, it's definitely making sure that I've got my vegetable plants ready to be planted over, say, planting my ornamentals. And so I want to make sure that in terms of prioritization, that I'm picking the part of the task that makes the most sense to help me achieve my goal. So if I can lay out a list of tasks, then I can number them and say, well, this is the one that has to be done first. This is the one that I can wait a little bit longer on. And then I can focus on the ones I need to accomplish and then eventually get to the others that are less time sensitive. All right, next up, I would recommend that whenever you're struggling, you seek advice. And I would say that looking at an expert gardener or somebody who's an experienced gardener in your area is a great way to find advice that is a good fit for your specific grow zone. Now, since you're watching this video, in a way you're already seeking out advice from someone who likes to show their own experiences as a Zone 5 gardener. But there are a ton of options out there where you can seek advice from people who are very knowledgeable in the craft of gardening. Local extension offices, we've found from personal experience that they're a wonderful, a treasure trove of information. And the people there are often so willing to provide, there are a lot of master gardeners to provide advice to you. And local nurseries are a great place where you can also find advice from people who have had experience with gardening. Especially if you're a beginner gardener, if you're unsure which plants are going to thrive in your area, reach out and I'm confident you can find some free advice that's going to be very effective for you. Now, I'm going to say that all of these tips are important, but here's one that is vital. Limit your options. And what I mean by that is that if I open up a catalog, a seed catalog right now, and I probably have 10 or 15 that I've already received in the mail this season. There are hundreds and hundreds of options of different plants. Limit yourself. Don't get overwhelmed with all the possibilities. You know, you can seek out those experts that we talked about and they can provide advice to you. You can even research online which varieties work best in your area, but try to limit yourself a little bit, especially early on. Tomatoes are a really good example of this. Last season, we grew 26, 27 different varieties of tomatoes out of the 10,000+ varieties out there. Some of them perform better than others. And so what we're doing this season is we're limiting some of what we're growing based on the results of last season, based on our experience of which ones grew best. Limit yourself and you're going to find it's a lot easier to make decisions moving forward. All right, next up, embrace imperfections. And we did another poll for our community where we asked you to reflect on a quotation by Zig Ziglar that said, you don't have to be great to get started, but you have to start to be great. And I think that that's a key here. What we're doing in the experience of gardening is not always going to be fantastic. We're going to have failures. We're going to have plenty of imperfection, plenty of times where we don't make the right decisions or we just don't get the results we want. Well, embrace that and don't let it discourage you. Instead of saying, well, I didn't get this result that I wanted, so I'm going to not try gardening again in the future, use it as an opportunity. Enjoy the struggle. As I always tell my students, enjoy the struggle, use it as an opportunity to learn, and do better next time. Start small. Now, we've given this advice in multiple videos, and you're taking advice from someone who has transformed the entire outside, the entire exterior of our property into garden space. That's been the work of multiple years. And believe me when I say the amount of time, especially over the summer, because as a teacher, I have the summer where I can focus in on the garden. The amount of time that I spend out there with my family is a lot. And so I don't want you to be overwhelmed, especially as you're trying to make decisions and move forward and get out of this analysis paralysis. If you want to start with a few containers, that's a fantastic decision. If you want to start with one small bed, start small, especially if this is your first gardening experience. Don't overwhelm yourself, limit your choices, and move forward by starting small. Use technology to help you in this process. You know, it's pretty amazing the speed with which technology has improved, the availability of technology, and it's right there at our fingertips. I think it's absolutely fantastic in many ways. Sometimes it moves a little too quickly for me, to be perfectly honest, but there are so many apps and tools available to help you make decisions in your gardening practice. There are apps out there to help you with garden planning for layout. There are apps out there to help you determine which plants are best for you. I love apps that show me which vegetable is what in the garden if I've forgotten once I made the decision to plant something and I didn't label it well. But if I'm trying to overcome analysis paralysis, I think one of the apps that I would look for would be something to help me track my progress, to keep notes and to know exactly what I've done, when I've done it, so that I can continue that process of doing this gardening step by step and continually move forward. And last but not least, keep it simple. You know, gardening can be as complex as you want it to be or as simple as you want it to be. If you're picking out the fruits and the vegetables and the flowers that you love, and that's your passion and that's what you're growing, you can find that you can keep it a simple process, something that you can really fall into line doing in a year-to-year basis. And then you can build up complexity as you get better at the craft, or as you work more into it and you maybe have more time, or you become better at gardening. But especially early on, just keep the process as simple as possible. One thing that I would say along these lines is keep your layout as easy to maintain as possible. That means easy to keep weeded, easy to access. If you add too much complexity to your garden, you can find that maintenance becomes a pain and becomes less enjoyable. And gardening, with all the challenges, with all of the potential frustrations of failure, gardening should be an enjoyable experience. Now, I was just having this conversation with a group of people. We were talking about the fact that it's spring break here where I teach. And the question that we were asked was, what do you do to relax? And my response was, get my hands in the soil. Well, that's something that I want to do free of any of this paralysis. I want to get this process moving because I do have end goals. With my family, we want to get out there and enjoy nature and be productive when it comes to our gardening. And I'm not going to make that happen if I'm sitting here just spending all of my time doing research. So there are lots of ways to move past analysis paralysis in the garden. And if you take advantage of the tips that we gave you today, we think you're going to be headed down a great path toward a highly productive garden this spring. Well, we hope you enjoyed today's video and found it informative and useful. We try to give you as many gardening tips as we can as we are learning them ourselves. If you did enjoy today's video, don't forget to give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.